Hey gang, it's Professor McElroy. I'm here. It's 6:25. I just shared my screen. I'm gonna wait till about 6:30, 6:35 or so to start, just to make sure students have an opportunity to log in. The Zoom link is new to them because this is a TEC course where students can watch live, they can watch it recorded, and they can come in the classroom. I kind of have students spread all across the three different platforms. So I'm just going to give the students that want to log in live a couple of more minutes to log in. So somewhere between 6:30, 6:35, we'll start the Learning Module 1, Lesson 1, Week 1 lecture. Hello, gang. I'm just giving 3 or 4 minutes or so here to see if anyone else pops online. Looks like we have 7 or 8 in the cohort, and a bunch of you are online. Some of you are residential, and others just like to kind of log in live and watch it. So I'm just giving them a couple of more minutes, and then we'll kickstart Graphic Design 1. So, hello, gang. Graphic Design 1, Professor McElroy here. This is a technology enhanced course. So if any of you are new to Hodges or haven't taken a GRA design course before, what that means is that we stream my desktop. I do my lecture here in class. So those that are residential students come sit in the classroom and interact and do the projects as we're doing them here. We have hybrid students, students that watch live online, and I record this. Why you can see this little heartbeat up here in the corner. That just means it's being recorded. And then later on this evening, it takes a little while for it to post to the cloud, but it does post to the cloud later this evening, traditionally when I'm home. And then I'll post the sharing link and the password, and then you can watch the lectures as a recorded lecture series. So there's really 3 ways you can do it. So it's interesting because it doesn't matter if I have 20 students in a classroom, 10 students in a classroom, 5 students in a classroom, they all kind of do it differently. And I like it because, you know, we're in a day and age where, frankly, jobs are done differently, for good or bad. This thing called the pandemic has kind of forced us into a technology-oriented society more than we already were. And so now lots of jobs, including designers, can be done remotely. And that's actually one of the appeals of having a design background, is that you really can work for yourself or do it from anywhere. I mean, you can go on to any of the job boards now, like Indeed or Monster. I don't know if anyone uses Monster anymore, but I would say probably 75% of the jobs that you see actively posted for design are hybrid or remote, I mean, or contractual. It's crazy. So good and bad. I love technology. That's why I got into this field to begin with. So I love technology, I love software, and I consider myself to be a relatively creative individual. So I was really lucky 24, 25 years ago, graduating with a degree in design, that the opportunities just kept getting bigger and bigger and bigger. What was called a commercial artist at the time, an artist that did art for commercial applications, evolved from commercial art to graphic art, because the art became more graphic in nature, more bold, more colorful, more simplified. So that commercial artist became a graphic artist, which became a graphic designer. And now you see lots of places, companies are hiring what they call digital designers or UX, UI designers. So user experience kind of designers, web, multimedia people. So this is Graphic Design 1. So we're going to learn a little bit about what I consider probably the 3 mainstays in the design field, which is Adobe Photoshop, Adobe Illustrator, and Adobe InDesign. And you might kind of recognize from my pace and my voice that they all start with Adobe. They all start with Adobe because Adobe Creative Cloud, which used to be called Adobe Creative Suite, where they numbered them, which is now Adobe Creative Cloud, is a cloud-based group of software applications, kind of like Word is now 365. You download it once to your computer and it updates itself in its sleep when you aren't at your computer, or if you're connected in any way to the internet. And so they don't really do numbers anymore. They just do Adobe CC, and then they do the weekly, monthly, yearly editions of updates to make the software bigger, bolder, better. I started when half of Adobe's portfolio was owned by somebody else. So I've been kind of using this software for a really long time. Macromedia owned probably half of the software applications that now Adobe claims as their own, as they've kind of built their portfolio of software applications over the years. And now they've spawned into app-based applications. So like Adobe Illustrator, you can put on your iPad or your Samsung Galaxy. Photoshop now is on your iPad or some tablet that you're using. It's an app you can download. So even Adobe is evolving. We use Adobe because it has been the program for the industry for as long as I've been in existence. So they've been the main software application. So we teach creativity, we teach process, and we teach software to an extent in the design programs. Hopefully, you see what Photoshop does with raster-based or pixel-based images, and you're like, oh, I use Procreate, or I use Affinity Designer, or I use some other app that does the exact same thing that Photoshop does. We're going to teach you the toolbars, the names, the terminology, how things are done when manipulating photos. You probably, hung out with someone before that says, look at this picture I Photoshopped. Well, how much do they truly know about Photoshop? It's just become such a common term to use for image manipulation that everyone says, I Photoshopped the image. Well, when you've been around long enough that they name the process after you, that probably tells you that it's a pretty good thing. So This Graphic Design 1 class is an introduction to basic graphic design. So some of you may have in high school or in just playing on a personal level, played around with Photoshop or Illustrator or InDesign before, but we're going to take 1 week per application. And we're going to navigate through the Canvas shell, and we're going to talk about where your books are. We're going to talk about resource files and that sort of thing. Hopefully, it'll be about maybe a 2 hour to 2 hour and 15-minute lecture. That's about how long I like to keep my lectures in recorded state, so that it gives any student that's watching it back later a reasonable amount of time to navigate and listen to the course and navigate through Learning Module 1's assignment. So this week is all about Photoshop. Adobe Photoshop is a raster-based or image-based software application. Means it's the place you go to manipulate pictures. Raster-based images means little squares of color, right? You zoom into a picture, little squares of color. I'm going to show it to you. That is pixels, and pixels make up images. Those images and the resolution of those images is what we manipulate in Photoshop. And there's lots of ways to manipulate images in Photoshop. The book and I are going to teach you some of the best practices. Doesn't mean there aren't other ways to do it. But over my 25 years of using the program plus, I feel like I got a pretty good grasp on the better ways, the more time sensitive ways of doing basic design skills that you would use to make an advertisement, make an image collage, make any design with photos that you would want to use for a graphic design application. So we'll do a personal lecture here tonight where you can follow along, or you can watch back later, or you can just listen to me if you want to. And that'll be how we kind of springboard into our Learning Module 1. You'll also notice that Learning Module 2, 3, and 4 are turned off. They're not published. The reason they're not published is because I like to take it 1 week at a time. A, it gives me a chance to tweak some things if I think we need to tweak them as we're learning along the process. And B, it doesn't overwhelm you with what you see in the course by looking ahead, when all I want you to do is look at what's in front of you. So this is a Thursday night class, which means we're already 2/3 through the week, and we're just tackling the lecture now. But remember, we have until next Thursday to tackle the basic projects that we're going to do. And they are very introductory in nature. So that's a good thing and a bad thing. I can show you some best practices. You can play around, but they really shouldn't take you that long. Like Photoshop has 4 chapters assignments for Learning Module 1. The first 2, I would say, are like 30 minutes long. They are very short introductory Photoshop assignments. Learn the dashboard, open up a picture, zoom in and see the pixels. I mean, some really basic stuff. The hardest thing from the first 4 chapter assignments are copying, selecting, pasting images from multiple files into one file. I mean, very simple kind of step-by-step stuff. In my lecture, using my own images, we're going to do the very same thing so you can kind of see how we do it. What I tell all students, especially in an introductory course like a Graphic Design 1 course, is practice. We have images at our fingertips. I'm going to show you different places you can download free images. The best way you learn is just to practice. Open up some pictures, cut and paste them, change the opacity, tweak the colors on them. Just play around with them. That's how you learn. Oftentimes we get into something and the time goes really quickly because we're enjoying it. That or we're frustrated with it, but either way, time goes really quickly. So practice, practice, practice. We have a full week to do some very basic skills. I'm going to show you the step-by-step. I'm going to introduce you to all the terms in your first 4 chapter assignments. So nothing should be kind of all that new to you at the end of the lecture. You should just be reading it to reviewing it. Okay, so that's my introduction kind of spiel about Graphic Design 1. The first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to pop into the announcement sections, because if you've ever had any class with me before, you'll know that I love the announcement section. And you'll already notice that there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 announcements, and we haven't even gotten together yet. I like to post stuff in there. I like to share things, feed your brain. This isn't a blast email, it's an announcement board. So please be checking it a couple of times a week because I really like to share things with the class. So you'll notice the very first one is just the introduction to graphic design, right? This is just, hey, this is the class, this is when we're going to get together. Announcement number 2 is just some cool poster designs I saw that I thought would be inspirational in some way, shape, or form. We're going to talk about typography in Photoshop a little bit tonight during our lecture, but I always like to kind of share some things that might inspire you as you start to learn about design and how this career, this field, this profession, this skill set works. So I'm constantly feeding my brain with design ideas. So hopefully you take a few minutes every once in a while to pop into the announcement section and see what I'm sharing. So this one is just about beautiful typography, really cool posters. The next one is about an agency that I really love, which is Duffy. Duffy is out of, I think, Minneapolis, Minnesota. They do some really cool design work. They do everything from logos to packaging to all forms of branding, commercials, all kinds of stuff. If you ever just want to feed your brain with cool stuff, neat colors, cool typography, nice images, just feeding your brain with what good design looks like, Duffy is a really great place to start. And I posted a few images in your announcement section from Duffy, some different professional projects and things like that. But absolutely take a few minutes to pop through and feed your brain, right? There's no such thing as a new idea. It's your take on an old idea. So the more you can feed your brain with just cool stuff, I don't care what field you're in. If you're seeing what the cutting edge thing is or what's cool out there right now, and it has anything to do with your field, without you even knowing, subconsciously you're feeding your brain with things that are successful in your career field. So even if you just want to learn a couple of skills that you can use personally and you want to learn Photoshop, so you took this class to learn some basic things, either way, you're feeding your brain, and I'm going to try to help feed the brain for you. So first 3 posts are just me educating you a little bit on cool stuff and places to find cool stuff. The next one right here is the zip file of some of the images that we're going to be playing with tonight. You can either just watch me and listen and see what I'm doing and watch it back later, and you can download the files later, play around later if you want to, but we need these files in order to do our basic little lecture this evening. I downloaded some beach pictures, some things that I thought that would be cool, that are Florida by nature. So I thought we would do some color correction, some cloning, some content aware filling, some cutting and pasting of pixels, some basic things in Photoshop. And having some new different pictures than your book pictures sometimes is a better way to go, especially for the lectures. So I like to download my own images to play around with. Now, if you were ever curious about where I got the images from, Pexels.com is a really great resource for downloading super high quality, free to play around with images. That's the hardest part about design, is getting high quality, high resolution, good pictures to play with. So I actually downloaded those images from Pexels.com. There's also a site called Stock Exchange. That one's been changed hands a couple of times, and that's more people that don't have as strong a background in photography that took pictures and posted them out there for you to play around with. Still a cool place, the Stock Exchange, but Pexels really has kind of taken the lead on personal, high quality images that you can play around with. And keep in mind, we're doing this for educational purposes, so we can play around with pictures. There's no rule against that. So when you see images or illustrations or things that we're using in the lecture, traditionally I've downloaded them from a free stock site. So next week I'll show you where I download some vector-based illustrations when we play around in Illustrator a little bit. So I downloaded those pictures from Pexels.com. So you always have those at your fingertip. You also have those at your fingertip for any out of book play around projects I might want you to mess around with. So you can take the pictures yourself with your cell phone, which some students do, because cell phones are ridiculously high quality now, right? 12 megapixel, 13 megapixel, right? Really high quality. You can take the pictures yourself And we do have students to do that. And sometimes it's really fun to see what they take pictures of. Or B, you can download some high resolutions from the internet. If you do that, Pexels is a really good place to get them from. You can go to google.com and do an image search. You can go up here and do new window, and right down here, you can type in like seashell, because we're doing Florida stuff, and you can do images, right? And you can do images, and you can go to the tools menu and you can organize by large. And that way we know, like if I move my mouse over this is a really big picture. It's 1200 pixels by 777 pixels. That's a really big picture. 1200, 2000, 3000 pixels. That's a pretty good size image. So you can do it that way, but most students feel more comfortable going to a place like pexels.com because they're all high quality. They're all over 3000 pixels. They're all really huge. And that's the key to Photoshop. You need lots of pixels. It's kind of like wanting to watch a movie on your TV at home using Apple TV or Amazon or Netflix or any of those, right? They look really good on 4K TVs, 5K TVs. Now they have 8K TVs. The reason they look really good is because there's lots of little squares of color per inch across the entire screen. Well, those are pixels. So when there's lots of those across the entire screen, obviously the picture looks really good. If you took it with a disposable camera and you got it developed into a digital photo and you added that to your image collage, it's not going to be as good. And we'll talk a little bit about what it looks like when the picture really isn't that good. So really good resource for you week one is pexels.com, especially for our little mini out of book project. I always appreciate when students try to take the pictures themselves. I have a heart for the creativity of trying to take a picture yourself. So if you want to do it, you might get a little more personal credit from me if you try to take a picture or two by yourself. So whatever works best for you to finish the project and the skills we're trying to learn. So if you're not comfortable with that, maybe spread your wings a little bit and try it. It doesn't hurt to have one tiny little picture in your picture design. That's one you took yourself. It could be really tiny. You could make it the size of a stamp inside your design and no one would even know it was there. But I would know because I'd be able to tell you took it yourself. Okay. All right. So that brings us to the next announcement, which is just the information for Zoom tonight. Looks like 4 or 5 of you got into Zoom. So you know how to do that. Looks like a couple of newbies, a couple of veterans in the TEC format. So I appreciate you logging on live tonight. And last but not least is the book files for this class. Now, if you go to your book, they actually tell you how to download the student chapter files. So I'm actually going to do that just so you can see where it's located. We're only doing a few chapters in each software application, so I was able to download them and zip them up for you and attach them in the announcement section. If we were doing some of the chapters further along in the books that we may or may not tackle in graphic design 2, you should know how to download them because those files are enormous and I can't zip them and put them in Canvas because Canvas gives me a big red flag when I try to download gigs of information. So I'm just going over to the modules, and right here in our Start Here section of the course is where your books are. If you're a veteran, you probably already accessed these books before, feel kind of comfortable going to them. But just for the newbies in the class, we're going to go through the process. You'll notice there's a overview of the course, talks a little bit about the resources for the books, the ISBN numbers and that sort of thing. There is a link about me. I got a BFA in 1998 in graphic design. In 2001, I got a terminal degree in design, which means I have the highest degree you can possibly have in design, which means absolutely nothing other than the fact that I've done it for 25 years. So I kind of know a little bit about the business. I've worked in private sector. I designed point of purchase displays for Pepsi. I've done web design in my past. I've run a freelance business for 25 years. I've done a lot of design. So hopefully I can kind of pass on some good best practices to you as you start to navigate through the coursework a little bit. So I'm going to try to share as much of that professional experience as I can, even though we're only tackling a couple of basic little skills. But I got to spoon feed you a little bit so it inspires you to learn a little bit more so that you want to learn more, learn more, learn more. So hopefully at the end of this course, the light bulb goes off and you're like, man, I really think this is kind of cool. I want to play around a little bit more with the software. I feel like I like technology. I like software. At times I can be creative. So maybe I'll play around a little bit. Below that is the student introduction. It's our introduction discussion board for the class. If you haven't posted an introduction in there, please do that before the weekend. That's an opportunity for students to learn about who you are. I think most of you have posted in the student introduction already. There are a few that have not. So I'm going to kind of, hopefully they'll watch this on recording and they'll do their student introduction. It makes no sense to post week 3, your student introduction, because your students already learned about everybody else and they know nothing about you. So just share a little anecdote if you can. Sometimes I get pictures of cats. Sometimes I get pictures of what people like to do. Sometimes I get pictures of family. Sometimes I get pictures of just, I think this is pretty cool. And I'm okay with all the above. But this field, like every other field that you could possibly study in a workforce kind of environment, deals with team building. So this is my attempt at team building. Okay, so that moves us over to our access to our ebooks. If you click on these links, and you do not get 3 books right here, then you need to contact University Store at Hodges.edu, because there is an Excel spreadsheet with everybody's information on it connecting to these 3 books. So if there's a typo in your code, it may be that one book doesn't appear. Sometimes students email me and they're like, I can't see something or this, that, and the other. And I go, University Store at Hodges.edu, and I CC the student, because it's a spreadsheet that gets updated probably every 3 or 4 hours and gets uploaded to eCampus, right here, ecampus.com, who manages our ebooks in essence. So they got a spreadsheet with your name attached to a class and books. And if there's a typo in any way, shape, or form, sometimes you get a hiccup. So just know in any class at Hodges, if you log in and you don't see your books, immediately University Store at Hodges.edu. You call them, send them an email, and they'll connect eCampus with your information to make sure it's correct. Now you'll notice we've got 3 little Adobe books floating around here. Now, Adobe books are the books used to get certifications in any of these programs. If you wanted to get a little certification saying, I know a decent amount about Photoshop, through the course of a few classes at Hodges, you're going to learn every single skill in all 12 or 13 chapters in the Photoshop book. Do certifications look good? They do. Does it mean a whole lot if you can't create a quality thing on the end? Not really. So I don't lean as heavily on the certification as I do just learning the skills and creating projects that you can showcase to someone, saying, I can make something for you in Photoshop because look at these things I made in Photoshop. You can wow your family, you can wow your friends. You can make cool invitations for parties. You can create ads. You can create things for companies, menus, logos, all kinds of stuff. So we teach a lot of micro skills in graphic design, digital design, current term. But any one of those little micro skills can be a viable tool skill in your resume toolkit, and or something you can generate revenue from because you know how to do it. So all good things in life. That's why I love design. I actually love a lot of different things, but if you were going to have me pick out of these 3 applications, it is Illustrator by far. I use my iPad, I use my Apple Pencil. I can draw just about anything because I've drawn for a number of years. Do you need to draw to be successful at design? Absolutely zero. Zero need for the ability to draw, because I'm going to show you next week how you can take vector art that is either A, free, or B, you can license it to create all the things that I draw by hand. Is there a requirement to be able to be a good photographer to use photos? Absolutely zero need. There are stock image sites that every designer that graduates and gets a degree in goes to a company that owns a licensing contract with photos.com. I mean, there's a million of them. And when they need a picture of a tennis player to put on a postcard because they're doing a tennis event, they go to and download the picture. They don't need to take the picture. Is it a plus if you can take some pictures? Well, anything's a plus, right? It's always a plus if you're a surgeon and you can actually use your hands. With robots, is it a necessity? Maybe not, but it's certainly good if you can do it manually also. So don't be intimidated if you're not an illustrator. Don't be intimidated if you're not a photographer. Don't be intimidated by the raw skills that are incorporated into a digital career, because it's digital for a reason. The assets are out there, the resources out there, everything's out there for you at your fingertips. You just have to know how to use it. So my job is to show you how to use it so that you can be the best you can be at what you're good at. And I tell every student in every class, everyone has an innate ability. So we just need to find that innate ability and really expand upon it. And once you have that one thing that you do well, that you gravitate towards, we build all the skills around it. So I'm just as much a psychologist, sociologist, kind of a fact finder kind of instructor. I'm trying to find what you like, what you're good at, what you gravitate towards. I can teach you the other stuff. So let's find what you're good at and we'll expand upon it. And then hopefully you'll find a little passion and think it's pretty cool and start to do things on your own. If you learn these skills, but you're not passionate about any skills, it doesn't mean that you can't manage those skills. So just be aware that not all designers design. Some of them just oversee the design process. And that starts from a junior level all the way up to a senior management level. So many marketing and business students take basic graphic design just so that when they're managing something and it involves creative people that are creating output design items, they know how to manage them. So there's lots of ways to do this thing called design. Okay, week one is all about Photoshop. So if you don't see this book in your vital source e-bookshelf, it's like a digital bookshelf, this is the book we're using. So I'm going to click on it because I'm going to show you that it opens up as an interactive PDF. That's what this little thing is when it happens. Okay, thanks for telling me how to do things. So I'm going to close the little pop-up windows and you're going to notice it pops up and your cover page, here's a little cover page, the title page, the copyright page, doesn't matter any of those things. What matters is this page. So adobepress.com or peachpit.com, because they actually own Adobe Press, peachpit.com is where you would go to download the files I put in the announcement section. If you don't get comfortable with that process, you will, because if you take any courses that requires files to be downloaded, intro to computers, like literally any course that uses a third-party application of any kind, ebook that's tied to files, you need to know how to download the files. So when you go here, it's going to ask you to set up an account. So you just use your Hodges.edu account, you put in whatever password you're going to remember, and then you punch in the ISBN number. When you do that, it's going to show these 3 books on your digital bookshelf. That is where the files are that I have put in the announcement section, which is right here. So all I did was download them for you. So hopefully you have a computer at home you're working on, or you got a thumb drive or something that you can store these things on. Like I said, the files aren't huge. So as long as you get a 1 gig or maybe a 2 gig thumb drive, or you save them to the desktop on your computer, that's the perfect place for them. So the ebook is where those files in the introductory of your assignments is where you download them. Even if you download the ones that I downloaded, at least register your book so you can see what it looks like when you register a book. Sometimes there's bonus content, quotation marks, little videos or little how-tos or something embedded in the book. Adobe Press is the player. There's the ones that write the books for Adobe themselves. They edit them, they update them. There's actually a 2022 edition. I don't use the 2022 edition because it takes them a little while to work out the bugs in the 2022 edition. So probably beginning of 23, I'll do 2022. It gives them a chance just to do some addendums and make sure everything works seamlessly. So 2021 is the book editions we're using. And you're going to notice that your first 4 chapters, and I'm just going to describe them really quickly because we're going to actually do this in our interactive lecture tonight. Chapter 1 is just about opening a file in Photoshop and learning what the toolbar is, what layers are, where the properties menu is, just very basic things. Chapter 2 in your book is basic photo corrections, which means color adjustments, hues, saturations, making the picture look a little bit better, doing content fills, rotating an image, very basic photo corrections. If you only did chapter 2, you could fix all your 1920s, 30s, 40s, 50s photos of family that have creases in them, dust marks on them. And lots of students do that. They're like, oh my gosh, I learned a little bit about photo correction. Now I'm going to open up some old photos that I have digitally now, and I'm going to make them look better, clean up the seams, the creases, the tears, the dust on them. You can do all of those things in Photoshop, and you could do them pretty easily. So one of your book actually has an old photo that they have you open, and you do some color correcting and you fix a crack in the image. So you're going to see basic techniques. I'm going to show you some few techniques. The reason I say that is because one of probably my second job in the design field, I worked for a really big engineering firm. Do you know most of my day I was spent removing tattoos, piercings, taking gray out of people's hair. If they maybe had a little bit of a rough night's sleep, smoothing out their skin a little bit, because I was in charge with the employee directory, and every new employee got their photo taken. And you know, everyone in selfie world isn't happy with the picture they took. So I spent most of my early years photo correcting everyone's portrait that we had to take for the employee directory. So everyone wanted to look good. And the president didn't want any tattoos showing. Nowadays, that's probably okay. But back then it was a little bit more like, could you just smooth that out a little bit? They got some, a few little wrinkles or something around the eyes, or can you get this nose piercing out of their nose or anything like that? So I spent a lot of time with photo correcting. We're going to talk about working with selections tonight. So we're going to use the rectangular selection tool, the lasso tool, the polygon tool, the ellipse tool. We're going to use the magic wand. I'm going to show you selections, which is chapter 3. And the last one is basic layers. We're going to roll all 4 of these assignments into our personal lecture tonight. I try to do that each week with every program we use. I show you the basics. I show you what I use it for. I kind of show you some best practices. Sometimes I get kind of carried away and show you a couple advanced things too while we're playing around, but it's just because I get excited doing things. So I'm like, oh, the book tells you to do this, but you can really do it this way. It's okay to do it the simple way that the book does it, but it's kind of nice to get a preview of what the program can do if you use some of the more advanced features. So we are only doing some very basic photo correcting, selecting of pixels, and stacking layers on top of each other. Everything we're going to do in class tonight. So I'm going to close the ebook because I don't need the ebook in order to do the lecture, and we're going to play around with some images. So let me close that. I'm going to go back into, I'm going to close the textbooks. So Photoshop, the one with the pink flamingos, is all we're working on this week. Next week, we're going to work in this little book down here called Adobe Illustrator, with the lady on the front, with the pigtail flowing, with the clouds and everything. So only worry about Photoshop this week. And hopefully, if we get all our assignments done by next Thursday, all we have to worry about is Illustrator next week. Now, when I say that, I always preface the students and say, life gets in the way, family gets in the way, girlfriend gets in the way, job gets in the way, lots of things get in the way. If you don't get everything done with Photoshop by Thursday of next week, it's not heartache. Just make sure you email me so I know you're working on it. You just had a few things in life get in the way. If you drop off the face of the earth for 2 weeks and you re-emerge in InDesign, I'm going to be a little less sensitive to Photoshop and Illustrator because you dropped off the face of the earth for 2 weeks. I understand life gets in the way. I get it. Life gets in the way for me. Just make sure you email me, amacroy@hodges.edu, if life gets in the way, car troubles, had to work late at job, whatever it is, I understand. We're in a pandemic. Trust me, things get in the way. Just don't drop off the face of the earth. Because if I mark you absent a couple of weeks because you dropped off the face of the earth, you may drop out of the class because the registrar doesn't have a quick trigger, but when it's a 4-week session, they don't have a long trigger. So just know that don't drop off the face of the earth. I really am an understanding professor. So just make sure you communicate with me. Okay, so I'm going to close that and I'm going to get back into our class. Okay, so that brings us into the module section. Hopefully you downloaded the student files for lesson number 1, lecture number 1, remember, which are right here, if you want to follow along with me. You got to make sure you download those so that you have them for the lecture. So I'm going to download them and kind of put them on the desktop. And that'll get us started here. with the lecture. So I'm going to move into the module section just so we can quickly just talk about the lay of the land in modules. It looks like about 3/4 of the class has had a class in Canvas before, which is beautiful. And it looks like about 3/4 of the class has had a class with me before, which is equally beautiful. So all of those things are beautiful. So you already know kind of the lay of the land with how design classes, and hopefully all your classes at Hodges have the same module setup. There's always an introduction, there's always a reading and resources, and there's always a recording from me talking about the basic skills, the outcomes for our module number 1. So please, take the time to look at the resources and the insights. Sometimes I embed videos, sometimes I share pictures. I just share things that I think might be cool and help you with your projects. And you're going to notice 1.4, 1.5, and 1.6 are our chapter assignments. When you click on those, you'll see a submit button at the top. Most of you have taken a class with Hodges before, taken a class with me before, so you know the submission process. You can submit files in a number of formats. If you just want to submit the Photoshop file for me, which is .psd, which is the file that will be created when you're done manipulating the chapter assignment, you could just upload that file to me. If you want to do a screenshot of what you created at the end of your step-by-step, if you know how to print screen on a PC or do Command-Shift-4 on a Mac and do a screenshot where it just shows me your design inside Photoshop, finished, it creates a PNG, I'm fine with that. If you want to do file save as and save it as a JPEG, I'm fine with that. If you want to save as and save it as a PDF, which is what most people kind of know how to do, I'm okay with that. Just don't give me a file I can't open. Don't give me some weird extension that is something that you created on your computer that doesn't show it. Every once in a while, a student will submit something without a .3 extension. So I have to guess by renaming the file over and over again what the .3 extension is. Let's try PSD, let's try PDF, let's try JPG, let's try GIF in order to open the file. So whatever you're most comfortable with, that when you upload it, the preview window shows the file you created, is perfectly fine with me. You're scored on completing the basic skills of the project. Am I following all 54 steps of your project in order to make sure you did every check? No, I'm looking at the final product and making sure I can see the basic skills. Did they take the crack out of the wall? Did they clean up the color of the picture? Did they copy a screw or a shell from one image and paste it into the other one? Yes, I'm just looking for the basic skills. If you want to go to Pexels.com and download your own pictures because you think the pictures from the book are boring, but you want to do the step-by-step that the book does, but with your own pictures, I'm fine with that too. If you'd rather do flamingos instead of the flowers that the chapter gives you, download some flamingos. Just make sure you download from Pexels.com so that they're good quality, because the book images are good qualities. I don't want you to do the book assignments and use really bad images, because even if you do a pretty good job, it still might look pretty bad. So just make sure that if you don't love the Photoshop images that the book gives you, and they update them every year and they're pretty good and I don't mind them. So it's not that they aren't great, but if you want to be inspired and do something else, I'm perfectly fine with that. You're going to notice below our chapter assignments that there is a discussion board. The reason I do a discussion board every week is because I want you to share something cool you found when you were doing some of the basic chapter things. Maybe you found a cool picture on the internet you want to share. Check out this cool image collage I found. Or maybe you just want to post it and say, I really don't like the magic wand tool. That's okay too. I just want to do some peer-to-peer sharing, which in the real world, we call that employee to employee, right? You're working in a team, you want to share some ideas with the other members of the team. It's just an opportunity to share some ideas with each other. It's an easy 20 points, don't skip it. And don't wait till week 4 to give me a posting in the topic share for the week 1, which is Photoshop. Try to do it after you do your book projects or when you find something cool. That way students can learn about things that you think are cool. You're going to notice that 1.8, I don't do it often, but I do it sometimes. A little quiz about Photoshop. It is open book. It is not timed. There is no ticker on this thing. You can read and learn and search as much as you want as you click through the answers. It's not a trick. It's not a game. I'm not trying to squeeze a few cheap points through the process. I want you to learn the terms. So the Photoshop quiz is terminology. So if you don't understand what the marquee tool is, Google it. If you don't understand what resolution is or what CMYK stands for, Google it. Look through your book, the bold things, the things in the call outs. That's all the quiz is. I can always tell if someone just speeds through it because they get more wrong than they should have. Take your time, take the quiz. If I think that you aren't spending enough time, I may turn a second attempt on for you. I'm not trying to trick you. I'm not trying to make you not be good at any part of the learning module. I just want you to learn. The process of going to school is to learn. And I'm a lifelong learner. I have the highest of pieces of paper you can for what I do. It doesn't mean that I don't learn every day. I'm reading a book. I'm researching case studies. I'm just doing things because I'm interested. I picked up a book on Lincoln the other day. My wife looked at me like, you spend your life reading design books. Why did you pick up a book on Lincoln? I want to learn about Lincoln. I think it's interesting. Maybe I might create a design sometime that looks like a guy with a top hat and a big beard. I don't know. So I am always feeding my brain. So the quiz isn't a trick. I just want you to learn some basic terminology. I want you to learn blurs and gradients and drop shadows and glows and selection tools and scaling and transforming and layers and layer palette. I want you to just learn the basic terms. You may not even like Photoshop in the end, and you might want to say, I'd rather just use the photo app I use on my phone, or Instagram is fine for filters. I can make cool pictures with my phone in Instagram. I'm okay with that too, but keep in mind, Instagram evolved from Photoshop. So all of those filters in Instagram are Photoshop filters that they made into an app and they branded it as Instagram. So all of those highlights, the dark lights, the soft lights, all the things that Instagram does is basically Photoshop. So all they did was bundle it in a different package. So if you learn the terms and learn the process, it might expand what you might like to do, even if Photoshop isn't the tool for you. And 1.9, I always like to include a little mini out of book project. And you can use pictures you take, you can download pictures from Pexels, you can do it any way you want. I just want to see how you do the skills we learned in a non-step-by-step environment. And it isn't a one submission for out of book either. If you submit it and I critique it and you don't like that the critique went a little harder than you thought it was going to, by all means, use my critique to tweak your submission and resubmit. I don't allow 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 submissions, but I do allow 2. So if you create something, I'm like, the pictures aren't great, or you squished this, or you didn't scale it right, or I could see white around the image you tried to cut out. By all means, take the white out of the image, resubmit it, and let's get a better score. Let's get some more points, right? The object of education is to learn a applicable skill, something that you may want to apply in your career, or maybe you just want to do for fun. So I want you to learn. I'm not here to kind of be the person to be like, you didn't do good on that. I want you to learn. And sometimes learning takes more than one attempt, and everyone learns differently. Some watch this recorded and they listen to it 8,000 times, enough that their significant other or their dog's like, who are you talking to over there? Because they listen to my recording so many times. Or maybe they watch live, they get it and they're good. Or maybe they just want to watch videos and learn a little bit about it and do the same thing. Or maybe they like to read step by step and that's the best way they can do it. Everyone's learns differently. In the end, I want you to create some cool things, learn a new skill, add a software to your resume, and really start to let you grow as a technology person, as a creative thinker, as someone who's just interested in things that are design related. So that's my pitch for Learning Module 1. Everything you see here will be formatted for Learning Module 2. The only difference will be the word Photoshop will be replaced with Illustrator. The word raster-based project will be replaced with vector-based project. So we're just going to learn the skills that you need to best create something based on the application that you're using. And yes, Affinity Designer is a company that sells you an app that you can use on your computer or your iPad or your Samsung Galaxy, and it's Photoshop and Illustrator combined. There are programs out there that are raster and vector based combined. So if you learn the terms of how to do the things separately, you might actually lean on programs that do the things together. So we're going to learn what makes Photoshop such a good program. And hopefully that helps you as you're navigating through some other things in your life. Okay, so that's learning module 1, where it's all about Photoshop. And this is how you'll be submitting projects for me. I have an iPad Pro, a MacBook Pro, a MacBook Air, an iMac at home, an iMac here, an iPhone. If you need to get in touch with me, if I am not in class and you send me an email, I'm really good at responding. I get here about 8:30 to 9 o'clock in the morning at the university. And if I don't have class, I'm here till the late afternoon. If I have class, I'm here till like 9:30 at night. If you email me, one of my devices is going to buzz and I'm going to answer you. The reason I try to do it very quickly is because if you have limited time and you're working on a project, you want to know how to move forward. You don't want to wait till tomorrow for me to respond so you can move forward. I get it. I'm going to do my very best to respond as quickly as I can as you ask questions and I answer questions. Sometimes I'll share a video. Sometimes I'll do a desktop share recording. Sometimes I'll just send you a quick note. Click on this, click on this, click on this to help you get through whatever hurdle you are facing. You also, email is really the best way. If you leave me a message, the message is going to go to my email. And the way I'm going to listen to my message is through my email. So you might as well just send me an email if you have a question about something or life gets in the way or you have a delay or something is going on with you. Please just reach out and send me an email. So this week is all about learning module 1. So we covered the home, we covered the announcements. The syllabus is what it is. It's the same at every class at Hodges. You're going to see the breakout, the outline for the course, what we kind of do each week, but I also cover it in the lecture. And modules. This is the area where you have access to everything that is in the course. When we get to week 4 and we get about halfway through week 4, you're going to start seeing me populate zeros in places where you didn't submit something. So that will be a red flag for you. Oh my goodness, it's week 4. I didn't do the discussion board from learning module 2. I better go in there and do it. I will give you the points for the discussion board if you realize it when I put a 0 in that you didn't do it. Sometimes things slip through the cracks. I try not to publish any modules we're not working in, so nothing slips through the cracks. Well, that being said, something always slips through the cracks. So if it does, you see a 0 in the grade book when we get halfway through week 4 of the class, please just go back and do it. I want you to learn about it, educate yourself, and just be part of the process. So you got to work with each other because the world is about working with each other, right? The reason I've been relatively successful in my career as a designer, a professional designer, is that I'm a really good communicator and I listen really well and I'm a team player. So hopefully if you're an introvert, you become a little bit more of an extrovert with this class because you really need to be an extrovert because introverts, they kind of sometimes disappear in the background, but extroverts, they're the people that's always in the front, right? So hopefully if you're an introvert, you become a little bit of an extrovert in this class. And don't be afraid to ask a question. Send me an email. There's no such thing as a bad question. You might have got stuck on something that some would say it's really rudimentary and simple, and others will be like, I had trouble with it too. There's no bad question. So if you struggle with something, send me an email and I'm going to try to record something or share a recording or send you a step-by-step note, something to kind of help you with the process. So, all right, that's enough of my spiel. It always takes me 40 minutes or so just to get through my spiel week 1, because some of you are new, some of you aren't. And then we're going to dive in to our Photoshop program. So Photoshop is the image-based software application for Adobe CC. And you're going to see it right down here, this little PS icon in my dock on my Mac, and that's Photoshop, Adobe Photoshop. It can be downloaded at adobe.com for a week for free. So if you haven't downloaded it before, go and download it to your personal computer if you're doing this as a from home personal computer environment. I always tell students, you really should spend the $19.99 and get a subscription to Adobe CC for each of the months that you're navigating through GRA classes, because we'll be playing around in different things. In Graphic Design 1, we're only using each software application for a week. So you can download and play with the freebie for the week because we're only using each software application for 1 week. That's how I structured Graphic Design 1. But if you really are interested in it and you want to play around with the programs, having a student basic Adobe CC subscription is really the way to go. We do have vlab.hodges.edu, and it is a computer that sits in room 220, and the programs are on that computer, and you can go to vlab.hodges.edu and use your credentials for Hodges, your Hodges email address and your password, and go onto that computer, and it looks like a browser window like this, and you'll see the Adobe programs lined right up there. And I just checked it the other day. They got a fancy new dashboard and fancy colorful icons, but just keep in mind, and I have Comcast at home, so I feel your pain. If your internet is slow-ish, the programs are going to be slow-ish, because remember, you're pulling the data through a straw. You're using the programs through a straw. So it's only as fast as your internet is. Is it good enough to do your basic assignments? Absolutely. You can go to vlab.hodges.edu and use the programs. But I would recommend downloading the freebies. And when the freebies are up, if you're able to, extend it for 30 days so that you can use the programs as you wish. Not a requirement, but as you wish. We do put it on VLab for you to play around with. Start with the free download. Okay, so let me minimize this because we got to jump into our program. So we need to download our student files, which is this little zip right here. If you're on a Mac, it goes to your download folder. If you're on a PC, I think you got to look at the bottom of your browser or go to your download section and get it onto your desktop. Keep in mind, the lab is blended. There's PC and Macs, but I am a Mac dude. So I know most of the students come and sit at a PC and I'm like, oh, PC. But I'm a Mac dude. So download the files, and you're going to notice if you unzip it by double clicking on it, we got these pictures right here. So we got a little beach cabana, we got some palm trees, we got some seagulls, and we got a beach scene, right? These are our 3 images. You also notice, look at the pixel ratio of these images. They're huge. Pexels does a really good job of doing some very high quality images to download. In a program like Photoshop, quality matters, and we're actually going to see that when we open up an image and play around with it. Okay, so we have that folder unzipped, which is right here. Remember, if you want to download your own pictures and do the step-by-steps from the chapter assignments with your own pictures, I'm okay with that. Just make sure that you're able to do the step-by-steps with your own pictures. Sometimes people have to lean on the downloaded images because they want to see exactly what it looks like with the picture open and the palettes next to it. And any variation of that, they get a little nervous. But if you're comfortable, you can use other pictures. One of the students has already downloaded some pictures and played around with the chapters using their own. So I'm okay with whatever. Just make sure that you're comfortable with the process, because I do want to see a finished product that is well done. Okay, so we downloaded our pictures, and now I got to go into Photoshop. So I'm just going to click on my little Photoshop icon. It's going to run, and I'm going to have my basic dashboard opened. So I'm just going to give you a second to do Photoshop, or if you're just watching and listening and you're downloading Photoshop later, that's okay too. I just want to make sure that you see what I'm seeing, even if you're going to watch it later. Are we okay? All right. So I'm balancing between students in the class, students online, students recorded. So every once in a while, I kind of have chatter going on. So, okay. All right. So now we're in Photoshop, and in Photoshop, I'm just going to do File New. That's all I'm doing is File New, and I'm going to create a new document. So when you do File New, you're going to notice that these are the formats that File New pops up. So you have saved, you have photo, you have print, you have art illustration, you have web, you have mobile, you have film and video. Well, traditionally, Photoshop was built for print world. We use Photoshop for a lot of other things now, including web, mobile, and film, but Photoshop originally was created for print. So I'm going to select print, and you're going to notice the presets for print. A letter size piece of paper, which is what you get out of your printer. Legal size piece of paper, which is what you get if you buy a house, because they give you those ridiculously long 8.5 by 14 inch documents. Tabloid is 11 by 17, which is like a poster you would see in a window sometimes if you look in a store window and there's posters for an event. And then we have all these oddity dimensions which match up to different outputs in the print world. Sometimes they're envelopes, postcards, things like that. So we're going to stick with standard 11, 8.5 by 11, which is a letter size piece of paper. And you're going to notice over in the presets that it has what's called portrait and landscape, which means 8.5 by 11 or 11 by 8.5. You'll know that by this little icon, 8.5 by 11, 11 by 8.5. This is also known as portrait and landscape. And you're going to notice that there is a resolution or a pixels per inch. And I'm going to show you what that looks like when we open up a file and we start looking at those pixels. 300 little squares of color per inch is what we call high quality or high resolution as it relates to print design. That's good quality. 72 pixels per inch is what we call low fidelity or low resolution, and that means not that good. On the internet, you see a lot of low resolution images because they care more about download than they care about quality. 300 is the magic number when you're using photos that you want to print on paper. If you're using photos that you want to print on paper, you want them to be good quality, high quality. So 300 is the number you want to remember. Now, when you click on color mode, there's really two color modes that you have to understand. RGB, which is red, green, and blue color mode, which is actually the color mode for things you want to create on the web, things you want to make that are only going to exist on a digital screen for someone to look at, web or multimedia. CMYK color is cyan, magenta, yellow, and black, and that is for things that are going to be printed on paper. So obviously, if you think about it, 4 colors, cyan, magenta, yellow, and black, is better than 3 colors, RGB, or red, green, and blue. So that's the difference. CMYK is for print, RGB is for color mode. And there is a distinct difference because the colors are mixed together based on the color separation. So if you ever went to a paint store, they drip cyan, magenta, yellow, and black into that can to make the color that's being rolled on your walls. It's a 4-color process when you make paint that you're going to paint on your walls. It's the same 4-color process a printer uses if they're going to print a really fancy poster or booklet or book cover or anything like that. 4 colors are better than 3. So if your quiz says what color mode is used for printing something on paper, you're going to see RGB and CMYK. 4 colors is better than 3. You want to pick CMYK color mode. I may trick you and say what color is best used for things on the web. And you want to know that web screen images are RGB, which is also the JPEG and PNG format. Okay. All right. So we're going to do cyan, magenta, yellow, and black. We're going to do 8.5 by 11 in portrait. Notice if I click the landscape, the dimensions change. It just turns the piece of paper on its side. But we're going to do portrait, even though you're going to notice a lot of the image that I captured were landscape. We're going to do portrait as our format because we're going to kind of do a basic little advertisement or ad. All right, so we got everything selected the way we want. 8.5 by 11, which is a letter size piece of paper. Portrait, 300 pixels or dots per inch. And cyan, magenta, yellow, and black color mode. All right, and we're going to go ahead and click create. And it's going to create this little document for us. Hey, success number 1, we made a new document in Photoshop and it opened up like this. Now, you're going to notice this thing right over here, which we call our toolbar. We're going to see this little area right here, which we lovingly call our artboard. And you're going to see things over here, which we call palettes. Toolbar, artboard, and palettes are all common to all Adobe programs. Also common to all Adobe programs is what we call the properties menu, which is what runs along the top here. This menu moves locations sometimes depending on the program that you're using. So some programs move properties to the bottom of the window. some put it at the top of the menu. Also, as you change tools in the toolbar, the properties up here change. So when you're working on a project in your book and you look up here and it looks different because they have a different tool selected in the toolbar. As you select tools, the properties change in the property window. Toolbar stays the same, palettes stay the same, artboard stays the same, but properties change based on what toolbar you have selected. So if something looks different in your book based on the screenshot, just make sure that the tool is correctly highlighted in the toolbar when you see the properties. Also know if something over here in the palette isn't visible when you're looking at the book and you're working on the project, it's because they're in the window drop-down menu. You see all of these things right here that list from tool presets to timeline to swatches all the way up to 3D. These are called palettes. So if a palette isn't open when you're working on something you're following along in the book, let's say the character palette, if I click on that, the character palette appears right here. So if there is something, a little tab that says something in your book that isn't open in your window as you're working on something, you want to go to the window drop down and look for the word that's listed at the top of the tab of the palette. It'll say swatches, it'll say gradients, it'll say history, it'll say all those things in these little tabs right here. So if you see something in your book that isn't the same, you need to go to the window drop down. There is a default workspace called Essentials, and your book works off the Essentials palette when the book is set up for you to follow along. We're not in graphic and web, we're not photography, we're not in painting, we're not in motion, we're not in 3D. We're in the basic Essentials palette. You can always go to the Windows drop down and you can always find it that way. You're also going to notice that as I scroll over to different drop-down menus, that there'll be things like copy is Command C, or in a PC, I believe it's Control C. Those are shortcuts. Sometimes you'll actually hear me say, I'm going to do copy, and I'll go up here and select it, but I'll also do Command C for me. Shortcuts are great for basic commands. Command C to copy, Command V to paste, Command Z to undo. There's a couple of short keys that are really make your life easier from a time management standpoint. If you look at them, you learn them, and you kind of remember them. You can always go to the drop downs and do the exact same thing, but you'll hear me say certain things that'll be like, oh, I'm doing a copy, edit copy, or Command C, and I might not go edit copy. I might just say edit copy and do Command C or Control C for a PC, just to know that we're doing the short keys. I'll try to do the menu first to show you where it's located, and then do the short key, because you can save hours worth of production time if you know some of the short keys. Copy, copy, copy over and over again, paste, paste, paste over and over again, just so you know. All right. So you'll notice that our document is white. Our document is white because these two little squares down in the corner, the top one is called foreground, if you double click on it, and the bottom one is called background. Well, the background is actually also the same as the background of your artboard, the color of your artboard. Traditionally, the default when you open, foreground is black, background is white. This is called a toggle switch, so we can toggle back and forth between background and foreground. Just notice that the bottom corner square is background and the top left square is foreground. Foreground's important because that's the color we fill stuff with. Background is the color of the background of the paper or the artboard or the document that we're creating on. When we did File New, we could have actually set the black background to a different color. So sometimes if I'm doing kind of a dark and gloomy thing, I may make dark gray or black the background color when I set up my new document, but know that the bottom right square will be the color I set the document to when I open it as File New inside of my artboard. So this color is only white because when I did File New, the background color was set to white. Okay, good. Foreground and background. Okay, so now that we know toolbar on the left-hand side, properties along the top, and palettes along the right-hand side, we need to learn about the toolbar, we need to learn about the properties, and we got to learn about some of the basic palettes. This is all chapter 1, 2, 3, and 4 in your book. We're actually going to cover toolbars, layers, basic adjustment, image adjustments, and navigating the program. So we're going to hopefully hit the basic skills out of the park as part of our lecture this evening. So let's open up one of the images we downloaded to the desktop. So let's go to File, Open, and let's find those images that we downloaded, hopefully to the desktop. So if you go File, Open, and you go Desktop, you should see your folder that says Lesson 1 Student Files. So I'm going to double click on that, and I'm going to open up the one that looks like a beach, which ends in 4521. So if you have it as a list, look for the 4521.jpg, because maybe you can't tell the thumbnails that well on the computer. So we're opening the 4521 image from Pexels. So just look for the last one. You're going to notice it's a JPEG format, and we're going to go ahead and open that. So I'm going to click open. And you're going to notice this really beautiful image that opens. So File, Open, and we're going to open up this image. I'm going to take one quick second and just mute because I'm going to open up the door a little bit. So just give me one quick second. All right, gang, I'm back. Okay, so we have our image open. So now we're going to talk a little bit about the toolbar. This is your chapter 1, Getting to Know, and we're going to play around with some of the tools, which is your chapter 2 and 3 and 4. Chapter 4 being layers, which is what this little thing is right over here. Now, when you open up an image in Photoshop, the very first thing that happens is it's set to your standard move tool, and your layers palette, which is over here, which should be defaulted in your Photoshop when you open it. If it isn't, you can go to Window Layers and it'll appear right over here. Now, when you open up an image, you're going to notice this little lock right here. This lock just means that the image is your background, quotation marks. What your image is that you opened is going to be the thing you put everything on, right? It's your background. Well, we noticed by File New, here's our background, right? This is actually our background, our File New. This is our background because we opened up a picture. Well, the negative with a picture is that when you open it, it's partially locked. And when it's partially locked, there's certain things you can't do to the image to adjust it because it is partially locked. Now, if you ever use any software application in your life, something you should learn very early on, that is if you right click or control click on anything in the document, there's a team of people trying to figure out what you would like to do by what you're right clicking, right? There's a bunch of embedded menus. Well, let's right click on the background layer over here. And you're going to notice that there's a few things that it's asking you. Do you want to duplicate the layer? Do you want to quick export it as a PNG file? Well, why would I want to quick export it as a PNG file? A PNG file is a file for the web. So maybe you opened a really fancy high resolution picture and you just want to convert it really quickly to a PNG because you want to use it on a website. Well, you don't have to go through the image adjust, edit, transform. You can just right click on it and make a picture out of it, and the picture will be smaller than the picture you opened if the picture you opened is a really big one. So these are some of the things that Photoshop has built into the right click command in layers. Now, there's a million reasons to duplicate a layer. You might want to duplicate a layer because you want to have a different look for each image in your file, meaning that one might be black and white, one might have a lot of red in it, one might have a lot of blue in it, one might have a drop shadow, one might have an outer glow. There's lots of ways to do, lots of reasons to duplicate a layer. Converting to a smart object, Photoshop does this in order to help you with scalability. Remember, pictures are made of a bunch of little pixels. A smart object makes Photoshop try to make the image scalable, more like a vector graphic than a one made of pixels. So a smart object is a way to try to cheat Photoshop a little bit and allow you to make something a little bigger than the picture actually is. It doesn't do great, but if you scale it like 10%, it does okay. So just kind of keep that in mind. But what we want is we want layer from background. So let's right click on our background layer. So let's do that again, right click and layer from background. And you're going to notice when we pick layer from background, it's going to ask us to rename the layer as something cooler than background. And we're going to name it beach. So we're going to name it beach because that's what it is. Best practice is always to name your layers what they are so you can find them later. And we're going to leave everything else as default, just normal layer mode, 100% opacity, which means you can't see through it, and no color behind it. We're just making this an image that we can play around with. So we're going to click OK. And you're going to notice the little lock has disappeared and the layer is now named beach. Well, we've started with some success here because we've been able to now unlock an image, which is important when we start to play around with it. We've been able to name the layer, which chapter 4 in your book has you just double clicking and naming the layer. Literally just double clicking on the name and naming the layer. You can also do it by right clicking and changing it from a background or an image layer and naming it again yourself. So there's more than one way to do it. Now, you're going to notice mine has what's called a bounding box around it. It has these little handles, these little squares that include rotate and scale. And you're going to see a checkerboard behind it. The checkerboard behind it means transparent. There's no color behind it, which was set to color none when we did release from background, when we did our right click. The reason mine has the handles on it is because with the move tool selected, you're going to see this little box right here called show transform controls. If I uncheck that, the box goes away. If I check that, the box appears. That's actually just called a bounding box. That's what this little thing is that surrounds the image with the squares. When I'm not transforming, rotating, and scaling an image, I have the box unchecked because the bounding box gets really distracting to me if I have more than one layer, more than one image in my document, and this box is checked. So my default is to uncheck it. Your default might be to check it because you always want to have the boxes there. There's no right or wrong answer. For me, it's a little distracting to have the boxes around the image. All that means is the image is selected. That's all it means. If we uncheck it, it's still selected. It just doesn't have the properties of rotation and scale attached to it, the transforming controls, but I can still move it. I would not be able to do that if the layer was locked. If the layer was locked and I clicked on this, I would get a big not symbol that says you cannot touch and move this thing. So the reason we freed it from the lock or unlocked it was because we can do that now. We can move it. Now, something you'll notice is when I move it this way, I can't see the image that is now off of the page. The reason I can't see the image is because this is called a bleed in Photoshop, which means the image is bleeding to the edge. Well, that's really important in print design world, because have you ever seen a book cover at Barnes & Noble with a little white frame around the edge of it? No, everything is printed to the edge and cut. The reason it's printed to the edge and cut is because this is called a bleed. You have to have a bleed in order to have the image go to the edge so that when you print and cut it, it looks like the picture's falling off the edge. The image is falling off the edge. I'm actually using Command plus and Command minus in order to view or zoom in and out. You'll notice here under view, zoom in and out for me is Command plus and minus. I believe for you it's Control plus and minus in PC world if you're using a PC. If you spend enough time with me, I think you might love a Mac though. So don't spend too much time with me if you don't love Macs, because I'm a Mac guy. So I am doing Command plus to zoom in and Command minus to zoom out. So the fact that the image goes to the edge is called a bleed, and that's really important. Now I'm going to do Command plus and zoom in as far as I can. And when I move in as far as I can, you're going to notice little squares of color. Now I got to move to the darker section so that you can see the squares of color. But when I zoom in, Command or Control plus as far as you can, you get into here. Right here, what you can see is 1280% for me, 1280% for me, or 12,800% for me. That's what an image is made up of. So when we're using Photoshop, Photoshop has a very simple principle. Photoshop exists to select, manipulate, copy, and paste pixels. Select, manipulate, copy and paste pixels. All we're doing is something with these little squares of color. That's how simple the program is. And there's lots of tools to copy, to select, to manipulate, to paste pixels. But the foundation is this little square right here. The better the resolution, the more little squares per inch. So this image is high quality, 300 squares per inch. So look at all of them. Those are the pixels just making up the water in this image. Right? Really good resolution for the size of this image. And I can always check how many pixels or little squares of color per inch by going to image, image size. Image, image size. Well, take a look at the quality of this image. It's 42 inches by 56 inches at 72 resolution. So let's see, you see this little lock symbol right here? Let's make sure that's checked, and let's change 72 to 300. So you see that little check right there, right? We want to make sure that it's 300 and we're going to make it 11 inches tall. By having this little box checked for linking, we have resampled a 46-inch wide image with a resolution of 72 to an 8.25 by 11 image at 300. But wait a minute, how big is our document? It's 8.5 inches. So let's change 8.25 to 8.5. And you're going to notice it says 11.333. Now, what does that mean? It means that our image is at least as wide as our document, but it's actually a little bit bigger than the height of our document. Well, that's okay, because we want to make sure it fills our whole document, and doesn't have any white extra space around it. So we want to make sure we make it at least as big as the biggest measurement in our document. So 11 was our biggest document. So we want to make sure this thing is at least a little bit bigger than 11 and at least 8.5. So there isn't any little white space around our image. Okay. And you'll also notice this thing now went from 34.9 megabytes to 24.8 megabytes. It actually made the image a little bit more compressed, even though we made the resolution higher. This thing was capable of being printed 42 inches wide. That's almost 4 feet wide, but only 72 squares of color per inch. So yes, it was able to be printed big, but not the best of quality, which means it would have looked a little bit more like you printed it on your home printer than if you went to Costco and had it printed at the print shop, right? The quality's better at Costco probably than your home printer. Your home printer is probably a DeskJet that kind of just drips the little dots of ink on the paper, and the resolution normally isn't that great. Costco has big, huge, beautiful plotters, and they print it really high resolution. We want to make sure our images are in the 300 range. So let's go ahead and click OK. Now, at 100%, you're still going to see that the image is pretty beautiful. It's still a pretty good image, pretty high quality. Now, we learned about opening a picture. We learned about pixels. We learned about image size. We learned about how to unlock a picture so that we can play around with it. We need to know how to get our picture from here over to here, which is our untitled document. So we have two ways to do that. You can go to File, Open again if you need to, and open the picture and do image size and rescale it really quickly. Give me 2 seconds. I'm just going to pop to a station and I'll be right back to make our transfer. All right, gang, I'm here. So now we need to get this picture from the beach layer over to our new document layer. We got to get it over there because right now it's over here. Now, best practice in Photoshop is always to have a file new document that's the size of whatever your finished document is going to be, and bring your pictures into that document. And that's actually chapter 4 in your book, is bringing layers together from different places, opening multiple images and bringing them all into one place, which is what we're going to do over and over again here, so you can see how it works. I need to get this picture in so we can learn about some of the tools in the toolbar. So you have 2 ways that you can get this image from the beach layer over to our untitled. So our beach layer over to our untitled. The first way to do it is to right click on the layer itself, which is named beach, and select duplicate layer. So this is the first way to do it. So you can right click your beach layer and do duplicate layer. And right here, it's going to say you want to duplicate a copy of the beach layer. Where do you want to duplicate it to? If we keep it here, it's going to make a beach copy layer in this document. We want to move it to untitled and click OK. Oh my gosh, where did it go? Let's click on our untitled and voila! Beach is now the layer above our background layer, and it's called beach. So if I hit the little eyeball over here in the layers palette, you're going to see that this thing is a piece of paper on top of our white piece of paper, which is called our artboard. Think of this like the background is a white piece of paper, and this beach is printed on a piece of photo paper, and it's sitting on top of our white background piece of paper. Even though you can't see this because this is covering it, it does exist below it. And the reason that's important, don't do what I'm going to do, but I'm just going to show you. If I draw a box and hit delete, that's white. It's white because the thing under it is white. And I can show that a million times, and everyone's going to be like, how did you do that again? Why is there white under it? We're going to do it several times. So I'm actually going to trash this layer, and I'm going to go back to the background, back to the image layer, because I want to show you the other way. So if you already did the duplicate layer and you got it over there and you're happy with it and you're like, that was really easy. The other way you can do it is, you see this little rectangular marquee tool? This is what's called a selection tool. So when I click my mouse and draw a box, you're going to get this thing, which is called marching ants. The marching ants means that this part of the image has been selected. So if I zoom in, only the pixels inside of this box has been selected. So if I copy and paste that, I only copied and pasted what was in that selection box. So I'm going to trash this, go back to my beach layer. So if I wanted to select all of the pixels in this image, I need to draw a box over the whole picture, right? If I draw a selection box over that, I'm only selecting those pixels. If I draw a little box over this, I'm only selecting those pixels. I want to select all of the pixels in this document. The easiest way to do that is a rectangular selection tool. If I wanted to copy a circle of pixels, copy paste, I could use the circle tool. Let's trash this. All right, so let's take the rectangular marquee tool. I'm going to draw a big box over it, and I'm going to do edit, copy, or Command or Control C. Now, I copied all the pixels that make up this beach image. When you copy it, it goes what's called the virtual clipboard. It means that those pixels that you copied are stored out in computer world, waiting for you to do something. It's kind of like when you copy a sentence in Word, the sentence is out in La La Land until you do paste, and then it puts the sentence there again for you. Same scenario. It's just putting it out in the memory of the computer and Photoshop that you want to copy and do something with those pixels. It won't let you store those beyond one copy. So if I copied something else, it wouldn't remember the copying of the whole image because I copied only a small little section the second time. So I got to do exactly what I want to do with the copy. So I'm going to go over to my Untitled and do Edit, Paste. So I can duplicate the layer, right? Or I can select the pixels and copy them from one document to the next. Why would I want to copy the pixels instead of duplicating the layer? Well, maybe I don't want all the pixels. Maybe I have a picture, but I only want a certain area of the picture copied and put into a new document. I might want to just copy those pixels and paste them over. I can also do that with a mask, but sometimes it's just easier to copy a part of the beach, copy. Actually, let's do it from here, copy, and let's do paste. And you'll notice I only copy part of those pixels. Man, I need to line this up. Let's see if I can get it exactly the same. Oh, that's pretty close. Oh, slight shift, right? So I might want to just copy part of the picture and bring it in. Now you will notice when you duplicate the layer, the name of the layer comes over. When you copy pixels from one image to the next, it becomes a standard layer number. So if I want to rename it, I can double click on the name and name it Beach 2 or whatever the beach image is that I was using. So you can bring images from multiple photos by doing File, Open, and doing copy and paste all into one document. You can right click on the layer of each individual image and do duplicate layer, and it will bring it into your Untitled document. The key is you want to bring everything into your finished document. So if you're making a little flyer, a little poster, a little image collage, you want to make sure that you start with File, New to the size that you want the final product to be, and then you want to bring all the pictures into that. The chapter in your book has you use a picture frame and then copy seashells from different images and paste each seashell by the seashore into the picture frame so that you make a collage. The only difference is we're making a collage here in the end using different pictures than the pictures from your book, but it's the exact same process. Okay, let me get rid of layer number 2 because I already have layer number 1. Now, you should have a background layer and a layer called beach. Whether you selected all the pixels and copied and paste them, or you did duplicate layer, whatever you want to do, either way, you need a beach layer and a background layer. Before we go any further, best practice is always to do a file save. File save. And you're going to notice the beauty of cloud-based software applications. If you have cloud storage with Adobe, they'll let you save it to their own little special computer server and let you save your files there, and you can always access them on any computer you're using. Well, most people don't have that. They want to save it to their computer. So we're going to pick Save to the Computer, and you're going to get this little menu that pops up. Save to the computer, this little menu that pops up. Now, you should notice one thing. It's a Photoshop file, so your format should be Photoshop. But you'll also notice JPEG is an option, PDF is an option. There are other options. So when you do your chapter assignments, you can save them as Photoshop, you can save them as JPEG, or you can save them as PDF, and it's all fine. The only difference between Photoshop and the other two is the Photoshop will save the layers. If you choose JPEG or PDF, it will flatten the layers, which means everything becomes one layer. Best practice is to save it as a Photoshop file, which is called .psd. But just keep in mind that .psd is the biggest file size. So if you're uploading your project from your home computer, be patient, because a PSD file is always bigger than a PDF and a JPEG. I know I get the dirty look. I don't have the best internet, so I might be there for 3 hours waiting for my file to upload, right? If it takes a long time, you can save it as a JPEG. That is the most compressed of the file types here for making it smaller. I don't care about the quality when you give it to me, because I'll be able to see that you did the skills even as a JPEG. So if you're working from home and you don't have the best internet, when you're done with your chapter project and you want to do a file save as, you can save it as a .jpg or JPEG, and it will flatten the image. For our lecture, we're going to save it as .psd because we want to save the layers. So I'm going to name this lecture 1 McElroy. And you could name it lecture 1 Smith, Jones, whatever your last name is, .psd. So if you submit a Photoshop file for me, it should say .psd at the end of it. If you're on a PC and it does not pre-fill the .psd extensions, you can actually add .psd to your name to make sure that you have a PSD file. Never had any transfer issues from PC to Mac, but just be aware you should have a file extension that is recognizable across platforms. And you'll notice the box says layers checked. I want to have that checked because I want to make sure I still have a beach layer and a background layer. If I ever opened up my file later, I want to have those layers as an option when I'm creating my designs. You should always have what's called the source file. Even if you're working in Word and you save a PDF to give to your boss, if you don't save that Word file, you need the Word file. DOCX is the new extension for Word because it's an XML document. Never get rid of your source file. And there can be no greater comment than that when it pertains to design. You need the Illustrator file, you need the Photoshop file, you need the InDesign file. So don't get rid of the source file. I'm going to save it to the desktop because that's the place that I'm going to save my thing. And you'll notice right here is my .psd file. All right, so hopefully everyone was able to do a file new document and everyone was able to open up their beach image and right click it and make it a unlocked layer, right? Layer from background, and rename it to beach. And everyone hopefully was able to do duplicate layer and bring it in to the background layer, which was white, our new document, and we've now saved the layer. I'm going to mute for just a second to walk through the classroom just to make sure everyone is okay with their okay, gang, I'm back. Okay, we're at about 8:15. It's going to take me about 45 minutes or so, maybe a little longer, to do some of the basic image corrections and image adjustments that happen in the first couple of chapters of your assignment. Chapter 1 is the toolbar, and we're actually going to go down the toolbar right now. Chapter 2 is color corrections and basic adjustments. Chapter 3 and 4 is bringing things together and making multiple layers. So we're going to kind of do that over the next 45 minutes to about an hour. Okay, All right, so we have our move tool selected. You can only move the layer you have selected. So if I click on the beach layer and I drag around, I'm going to do Command or Control Z, so it goes back to its position. You can only move the layer you're on. Now, that also means that the layer you're on is the layer that you're manipulating the pixels on, right? We're going to edit them, we're going to copy them, we're going to paste them, but it's only on the layer you have selected. The hardest part with Photoshop is making sure that you have the layer selected of the thing you want to do. Because if I do an image adjust of any of the colors in our image, it's only happening on the beach layer. If I had another layer in this document and I did an image adjust or an edit scale transform or a perspective or a warp or a rotation, it's only happening on the layer I have selected. I know that's hard to kind of grasp at times because you'll have more than one layer in your document and you're like, why am things not happening? You have to make sure you're on the layer that you want the things to happen on. Okay, so we're going to go down the toolbar just to talk about what the different tools are in the toolbar so you know how it affects the layer. We're only on the beach layer, right? The background layer is locked. The little white canvas is locked, right? So we're only on the beach layer. So anything we do in the toolbar is only on the beach layer. If we copy the pixels, if we paint over the pixels, if we clone the pixels, if we delete the pixels, it's only on the beach layer. I repeat, only on the beach layer. If I zoom in, these pixels are only the beach pixels that we're currently messing around with or playing with. So just remember that as I bring more pictures in, there's going to be more layers, and quickly you're going to think you're doing something to pixels because you can see them as a complete collage. Doesn't mean that all the pixels exist on every layer. All right, so let's just start with the beach pixels and talk about our toolbar. Remember, as you go down the toolbar, the properties up here change, right? So the move tool has its own properties that includes transform, right? Because if you're moving an object, you might also want to make it bigger or smaller or rotate it, right? So the transform controls and the basic alignment tools, align to the left, align to the right. So moving your objects around layer by layer, right? Layer by layer. So just know that. All right. Underneath the move tool are what are called our basic marquee tools. And marquee tools are shapes that select pixels in a picture. So rectangle selects the rectangle pixels in a picture. Am I selecting any white from the background? I am not. I am only selecting the pixels on the beach layer. So if I copy and paste them, I've only copied and pasted the pixels from the beach image. And they made their own layer, right? So now, if I did that, copy and paste, the only pixels that exist on layer number 1 are the pixels that I copied and pasted from the beach layer. So I'm going to zoom all the way in here. So you see right here is no pixels. Right here is light blue pixels. The checkerboard only means that there's no pixels in this part of the image. The reason I turn the beach layer off is because you get tricked into thinking there are pixels up here, and there are, but not on layer number 1. Only on the beach layer do pixels exist up here. So I'm going to turn that back on, and I'm actually going to trash layer number 1 so we can get back in. Aren't the clouds so pretty when you zoom in and they're just little squares of color? They look totally different when you zoom out, all right, to 16%. All right, now, these are shape-based selection tools, which means if I draw the shape, it only selects the pixels inside of that shape. So the marquee tools are great if you want a circle or a rectangle to cut it out or copy and paste the pixels. Very basic selection tools. Mostly people use rectangle. They hold down shift to draw a square and they copy pixels out of this. So watch, if I just make a beautiful square and do copy and paste, Command C, Command V, or edit, copy, edit, paste, look at this beautiful little square. You'll see it all the time in ads, right? A really big picture that's a full bleed and little squares of smaller pictures, like at a hotel, beautiful picture of the outside of the building and little squares of the pictures of the interior of the building. All it is a layer of pixels in the shape of a square for each picture layered on top of the big picture that is the full one. So see, it's just a little picture on top of a big picture. Now let's trash this layer so we can go back to the beach layer. So the marquee tool is great for basic selections. If you need to copy and paste some pixels, I like to copy pixels in shapes from the original image and bring them into the collaged image. There's a fancier way to do it called a clipping mask, but we just need to understand the basic copy and paste process so we can start building up images. Okay, so maybe a shape doesn't work for pixel selection. Maybe you need to do what is called a free form selection. And there's 3 ways to do a free form selection. The first is the lasso. If I select the lasso, you got to have a steady hand to select the shape that you want to select with the free form. I can actually tap my mouse out there and it'll deselect it. So maybe there's a cow I want to select and it's this funky shape. I might want to use the lasso tool to select that cow. You got to have a steady hand to select the cow with the lasso tool because it is free forming. But I could actually select the head of the cow, hold down shift, select the body of the cow, hold down shift, select the leg of the cow, hold down shift to select the next leg, select the next leg, select the next. That's a sad looking cow, but I could use my lasso tool to select the cow by holding down shift, which you'll notice this little icon up here, which is the add to. Here's the subtract from, and here's the intersect for the lasso tool. Holding down shift is just the short key. Holding down option is the short key for minus. So maybe I didn't do a good job with the head and I want to remove some of my selection. The lasso tool is a free forming tool for selecting pixels. The polygon lasso is a great lasso for selecting things that have straight lines. So you'll notice if I click my mouse and let go, it actually lets me click, 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 back to the beginning, click, and I can select things with straight lines. Houses, buildings, boxes, things that are straight. A Lamborghini, that's got pretty straight lines, right? Easy to select the shape with straight lines. Last but not least is called the magnetic lasso. The magnetic lasso tries to follow the shape based on the color separation of an image, which means, and I'm going to show you with the bird image from our downloaded folder. So if I go to File, Open, and I go to my bird image. So I'm going to go to my bird image, and my bird image is 4491.jpg. So I'm going to go to 4491.jpg, and you're going to see these birds right here. And you see this little bird all by itself. It isn't touching any other birds. And I'm doing Command plus just to zoom in. I'm actually using the space bar, and the space bar turns into a hand, and it lets me kind of pan around a little. You're going to notice the hand is right down here in the toolbar. The short key is the space bar, and it turns the tool into a hand. So that's just a short key. I need to select this bird. Well, watch the magnetic lasso. If I click my mouse at the end of the tail and I just follow my mouse around the edge of the bird, you're going to notice the lasso is snapping to the end of the bird silhouette. So I'm just going to follow it and just follow my way around this bird. I'm just going to quickly go along the edge here. And you're going to notice it doesn't do a great job, right? But it's snapping to the edge of the document. And you'll notice that my bird is selected. Now, there's a thing called frequency right up here. And the frequency means the range of colors that the lasso is going to select. The lower that number, the more contrast between the image that selects. So I'm going to zoom out, and I'm actually going to do select, deselect, so I don't have those marching ants anymore. And I'm going to go back into this bird, and I'm going to click my mouse, and I'm going to follow along the edge. And look at how it follows the edge a little bit better by changing the frequency range of the colors, which means it includes less colors in its range. The higher the frequency, the more the colors, and that's why you get the jagged edges around the wings. But look how it tries to snap. The lower the number, the better the selection of the magnetic lasso. Now, I'm going to zoom in to the bird. So I'm just using Command plus to zoom in, and I'm using space bar to move. Well, look at here. It didn't do a great job around the edge of that bird. Well, remember, Shift allows us to add to our selection. But I'm going to be honest with you, the magnetic lasso, if I hold down Shift, let's see how well it does. It did okay. Oftentimes, when I want to add to my selection, I go back to the regular lasso tool because my hand is pretty good. If I hold down Shift, I can add to the bird on the regular lasso tool pretty well. So let's see where it made an error. Oh, I need to add that part of the wing. Gotta add that part of the wing. What if I needed to subtract? Remember, Option. I could subtract from the selection. So the top two tools are just selecting pixels, whether you select them with shapes or you select them with lasso tools, polygon for straight lines, magnetic for following along colors, or freeform lasso tool where it's as steady as your hand is. Now, if you use Photoshop on a tablet and you're lucky enough to have a pencil, you just follow along the shape with your pencil using the lasso tool, and it follows right along. It's like tracing on a piece of paper. It's like a coloring book. When you're using a mouse, it's a little harder, trickier to select. But remember, you can always Shift to add and Option to minus. and work your way around any shape in order to select the pixels. Now, when you select the pixels of any image, you can copy them, you can paste them, or you can edit them. Things like changing the color of them or changing the exposure levels. And we're going to do that in a minute. But right now, we're just selecting pixels. I want to copy the bird from the bird picture and get it into my lecture 1 picture. So right now it's a locked background, but I have the pixels selected. I just got to get them over there. So I can copy the pixels and I can go to my image and I can paste the pixels. And here is my little birdie that I can move around. Now look at him, he looks pretty cute and he's pretty good in the image. Now, if I'm copying from a photo, when I'm done copying, I normally close that photo. So if I'm done with those tabs, I close them, because remember, my finished product is all of my stuff together. And your book has you do the picture frame and copy the shells out of each individual, shell 1, shell 2, shell 3, shell 4, and it has you put it into the frame and move them around. The only difference is we're copying a bird and pasting it into a photo. Your book does like a 32-step process for that. We did it in a few less steps, but just to show you the selection tools. So we're in the selection tools. I think I should rename this. So we're going to double click on that and name it bird. I don't know what kind of bird that is. Is that a pigeon or what? Like, it kind of looks like a pigeon, maybe. If I zoom in, just so that you're aware, are there any pixels on the bird layer in the blue area? There are no pixels on the bird layer in the blue area. Don't be tricked by seeing blue behind the bird. There are no pixels on the bird layer in the blue area. So if I draw a selection box and I do edit copy, there is nothing on the bird layer in the blue area. So if you hide layers, and there's a checkerboard, there are no pixels in the blue area of the design. The pixels are on the beach layer. Are there pixels on the beach layer where the bird is? There are pixels on the beach layer where the bird is. So if I draw a selection box over part of this bird and I'm on the beach layer and I do copy and paste, am I going to have bird pixels on the new layer number 1? No, I have blue pixels because I copied from the beach layer, even though I can see the bird. That is the hardest thing to ever grasp in Photoshop. There are multiple layers, but you are only manipulating the pixels on the layer you're on. So best practices for me, if I'm doing something, is to hide the layers that I'm not working on so that I don't get confused that there's pixels I'm selecting on a layer that isn't selected. Many designers will do that, which means when I'm done with the beach layer, I lock it. So if I'm on the bird layer, there's no pixels there. There's nothing there on the bird layer. Copy. Sorry, you can't copy. Even though there's blue there, there's no pixels there. So don't waste your time trying to copy something that doesn't exist on the layer you're on. And I know you're going to be saying all kinds of not nice things to the program when you're playing around with your pictures, because you're going to mistakenly select pixels not on the layer that you want to select pixels on. So it's tricky, but just know that you're only selecting the pixels on the layer that is selected. Now, that brings us to one of the great tools of Photoshop, which is called the Magic Wand tool. And then they've since made the object and the quick selection tool, but the Magic Wand tool is the original tool under this little toolbar right here, which is 1, 2, 3, fourth tool down on the toolbar. So if you click and hold your mouse down, you're going to get this little menu, and Magic Wand is one of the tools. Now, you've probably heard the term green screen as it relates to movie shooting, when they want to do some really crazy thing where they can't put the actual actor in the scene or actress. So they put them on a green screen, and then they take whatever they filmed and they put it in the actual film of what they're recording. The Magic Wand is in essence the green screen. It allows you to select an area of solid color very easily. So if I have the bird layer selected and I want to select everything outside of the bird, remember the bird is technically sitting on a white background. He's technically on a white background because our background is actually white. I just hide that layer because I want you to see the checkerboard on our design. But I'm going to turn it back on just to make it easy for you to see that the bird actually does exist sitting on our white artboard. If I wanted to select everything outside of the bird, think about a white background on an image, a green screen, a green background with a character. Sometimes the easiest way to select the actual object on the green screen is to select the green screen first and then remove it or invert our selection. So if my bird was sitting on a white background, and in your chapter assignment, your seashell is on a white background, if I wanted to select the seashell, sometime the easiest way to do it, if it's on a white or a colored background, is to select the colored background first. So if I wanted to select this bird and the bird was actually on a white background, I could select the white background and do select inverse, and I have selected the bird. That's why film studios film on a green screen. They actually select the green screen and then invert the selection so that they select the object moving. They do the exact same thing we just did here. They do it in motion and we're doing it in still. So I'm going to show you what that looks like in Google World. So if I went to Google and typed in seashell white background, you're going to get a bunch of pictures of seashells on white backgrounds. There is a whole business on just taking photographs of objects on white backgrounds. Why? Because designers need the objects, and the easiest way to select them, to collage them, is to put them on a white background. Actually, my first job I was introduced to was agency work, and we would take pictures of cars were going to be on the covers of magazines. We pulled them into a photo studio that had a completely curved white wall, took a picture of the car, selected the white wall and inverted it, and it selected the car. Instead of tracing around the entire car, the rear view mirrors, the shape of the bumper, the tires, if you take a picture of the object on a white background, it's really easy to select the white background and then just invert the selection to select the object. And that's actually what your book does. So I'm just going to drag this really quickly to the desktop because I want to show you something. You don't have to do it, just watch. So here is my white background, and here is my magic wand. If I select the white background and do select inverse, look how quickly and easily I selected that seashell. So I'm actually going to copy it, go over to my design. I'm going to zoom out so you can see it, and I'm going to paste it. And here it is. It was on a white background, so it made copying it and pasting it really easy. Now, you're going to notice that it copied the shadow. And I actually don't want the shadow. I want to get rid of those pixels. Are there any pixels over here? No, the only pixels are right here. So it's kind of a shape. So I'm going to use my lasso tool, and I'm just going to circle that shadow and hit delete. Could I have done that one section at a time? Delete, 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 delete. Am I deleting any blue from the beach? No, I'm only deleting the pixels on the seashell. So you see that? Actually, see all these little white pixels? My type A personality would have me in here getting rid of those, because when you zoom out, you can actually see a little white border around there because my selection wasn't perfect. So let me zoom in here real quick, and I'm just going to clean up the shadow. Delete removes any pixels from your layer. So my seashell is right there. Now, so let's zoom out. If you Google search for any object on a white background, frogs, flowers, planes, cars, there's someone that has photographed that object on a white background. And the reason they did that was because a designer needed it in order to collage things together. A stop sign, because you're making an ad and you have a car and you want a stop sign in the photo. There's a stop sign already on a white background. Photo stock sites like photos.com make a living off of taking really good pictures of objects on a white background. It made it a lot easier than tracing that bird out of that image of all of the birds, right? If it's on a white background, it's a lot easier. Now, we have our marquee shape selection tools. We have our lasso, which I call our free form selection tools. We have our magic wand, which is our background or color selection tool. These are the three primary ways to select pixels in Photoshop. One of these three and a move tool to move them around. I got to name this shell so that you know that this one is the seashell layer. So we have the bird layer, we have the beach layer, we have the shell layer, and we have the background layer. If I move the shell layer up to the bird layer, do you think it will cover the bird? Yep. Why is that? Because this layer is on top of that layer from bottom to top. Remember, we're stacking pieces of paper on top of each other. The paper on top wins. The paper on top is the pixels on the top of our collage. If I want that bird, I have to drag that layer down, and now Mr. Bird is on top of seashell. If I take the shell and put it under the beach layer, the shell disappears. The shell isn't gone, The shell is under the beach layer. Everything is pieces of paper stacked on top of each other. The better you are at selecting and copying and pasting pixels, the better you'll be at putting images together. It's just the nature of the beast. The better you are at selecting pixels, the better you are at manipulating pixels, the better you are at collaging pixels. If you ever Google Photoshop image collages, you're going to see professionals that really do some amazing Photoshop collages. In Graphic Design 1 class, we're just teaching the basic selecting, copying, pasting, editing of pixels. When you get to Graphic Design 2 class and advertising design class, that's where we really expand upon the ability to manipulate these little squares of color. For the sake of our first 4 chapters, we are just copying and pasting things from multiple places into one place. And we're using these different tools to do it. Now, our frame tool is a tool for creating a space holder to put images in. Don't worry about that tool for Graphic Design 1, because that's an advanced frame tool for when we start building complex containers. So you don't have to worry about the crop or perspective tool or the frame or container tool. So we got the move tool, the marquee tool, the lasso tool, and the magic wand tool. The crop tool and the frame tool are for a little bit more advanced, although you could do cropping your image inside basic Graphic Design 101, but we don't really do cropping or rotating inside of one. I do believe that your picture is slightly crooked in chapter 2, and there is a very simple crop rotate of that tool. But honestly, other than straightening out a picture, Graphic Design 1 is not about perspective or crop rotation. So I'm going to undo that and get us back into. Now, the eyedropper tool is for us to sample color out of our picture. And you'll notice right down here, the foreground color swatch is changing when we sample. Remember, these are little squares of color. So when we click our cursor, we're selecting one of those little squares of color that make up this picture. Why is the eyedropper important? The eyedropper is important because the key to designing something is to use common colors. So if I was using my text tool to write some words here, I would want the words to be the beach or the sky color or the ocean. So the eyedropper is a really easy way to sample from our image and pick a color inside of our color spectrum, the foreground color. Why the foreground color could be important is because something as simple as a shape that we draw inside of our document with our shape tools could be used using the eyedropper to get the color that we want. So you can see like a really interesting possibility. I use the eyedropper a lot because if I want to write text, I want to make a shape, I want to do basic things that are full of color inside of my design. I want to make sure the colors are the same from the image so that everything is consistently the same. So if I'm using the text tool, I want to make sure the color of my text is the beautiful color of this ocean right here, which actually is a really beautiful color. Okay, so we have the move tool, we have the marquee tools, which are shape, we have the lasso tools, which are free form shaped. The magic wand tool is for selecting backgrounds. solid colors and maybe inverting your selection. The crop tool allows us to crop or rotate or perspective our image, but we're not doing a whole lot of that in Graphic Design 1. The frame tool will actually see in InDesign when we do a couple of simple things in InDesign, because that's built on the frame tool. The eyedropper is for sampling colors that we might want to make something that color, like a shape or some words or something like that. Our healing brush is where we can actually heal parts of the image that we're working in. Now, I'm actually going to show you the content aware tool in order to show you the best way to heal inside of an image. So now that we're in the healing tool, I'm going to zoom down and I'm going to pan over to the beach. Now, if you have your image open and you zoom in, you see this little spot on the beach that looks like somebody left something there, this little piece right here. So we can zoom in and you can see, well, that's not a perfect thing for the beach. I don't know if that's a piece of a seashell, maybe it's some seaweed, but in advertising world, they actually water down the road before they photograph a building. So the road looks perfect when they photograph it. Well, somebody didn't water down this beach before they took a picture of it. Ha ha ha. We need to heal or fix that part of the image. Now, I'm going to show you a really kind of easy way to do what is new in Photoshop, which is called content aware. So I'm going to take my little rectangular shape tool and I'm going to draw a box around that little blob in the beach. Imagine this is a piece of trash in the grass. Maybe it's a footprint in the sand that you want to get rid of. You can actually fill the area that little issue is in your picture with all the pixels that are around it. Now, this is a new tool. So am I only selecting the pixels on the beach layer, right? I drew that box over the beach layer. So if I turn on the seashell layer, there's no shell there. If I turn on the bird, there's no bird there, right? I'm on the beach layer of my design, and I'm going to unlock it so that I have full access to all of the pixels on my image. Now, it's called a content aware fill. So do you see this little thing called content aware fill? It's going to allow me to fill the pixels inside of this box with all of the pixels around the box. So if I do edit content aware fill, look at the sample area. This is called the sample area. So it's sampling from all of the green pixels around it. And look what it did. It removed the blob. Zoom out. No imperfection on the beach anymore. I've done this with labels on book covers and took the entire label off of it and it filled it in with the image around the label. I mean, you can literally, if there's a barcode on your photo, if you zoom into the barcode and you select it with a rectangle tool and do edit content fill, it'll fill the barcode with the image behind the barcode. This used to be done with an actual airbrush, and we used to call it airbrushing the image. You would have to actually airbrush this image in order to fill it with the pixels around it. Now look, I wasn't on the right layer, right? I wasn't on the right layer. See what's going on here. Let's get into our layer. Let's zoom in. Oh, and it filled it already for me. Well, it didn't do a very good job. See that little square there? Let's zoom in. Layer 2 is my fill. Layer 1 is my other fill. So now let's make sure that we get in here. So I'm going to show you another little trick, which is what is hidden inside of our clone tool. So in your chapter assignment, you actually have to clone a crack out of a picture, like a little area that was folded. It doesn't do the content aware process, it does the clone process. So if I hold down my Option key with the clone process, you're going to see it turns into this little sample symbol. So watch if I hold down my Option key and click my mouse once. So I'm going to click my mouse and let go of the Option key. You see how it's sampling? You can actually see that my brush has turned into the area I sampled from. Well, watch. Option key, sample. You see what a hash is on the left-hand side? That's where it's sampling from, but it's putting it over here. Zoom out. Gone. Zoom in. Clone tool, hold down Option, click once, let go. Click your mouse over and over again. No more thing on the beach. Big ugly thing over here. Zoom in. Hold down the Option key, sample from down here. Hold your mouse down and you can actually just squiggle it. Zoom out. No ugly spot on the beach. I had piercings, changed the color of a hair, fixed an eyelash, literally anything you can think of that wasn't perfect in a photo before there was content aware fill. I mean, look at all the imperfections. If you actually look at this photo, Option key, click here, fill it in. Option key, click here, fill it in. Option key, click here, fill it in. I spent my life making the world look utopian by clearing out every cigarette butt, trash can in the lawn, piece of paper. Somebody had a mole on their cheek they wanted removed, like you name it. The clone tool is your friend when it comes to that. The Option key samples, you let the Option key go, and you can literally make this thing perfect. I probably would have taken a picture without all these footprints in the sand because this would drive me crazy. These are all footprints that I would have to remove if I really wanted this to look like a pristine beach that no one has stepped on. Now, let's turn our bird back on and let's turn our shell back on. Now, something you don't want to do. Everyone does this at one point in time. The brush tool is exactly what you think it is. You can draw on something with the brush tool. Now, you see that we're on the beach layer. Are there any blue pixels anymore on the beach layer because I just painted with a brush onto that layer? There is not. If I wanted to paint on the beach layer, I want to add a new layer and paint on that layer so that I don't paint over the pixels on the beach layer. Do not use pencil, paintbrushes, paint bucket, anything on the layer of an image because it removes the pixels from that image. It takes them away. Don't paint on an image. Paint on a new layer, because if you don't like the paint, you can get rid of it by hiding it or trashing it. But look what I did here. I painted on that layer. Can I move what I painted? Nope. I have ruined that part of the image because I painted on the image. Your book in chapter 1, 2, 3, and 4 does not have you painting anything. I just want you to be aware of it if you're doing the out of book project and you want to scribble or color something or make a shape, that if you do it on the layer of the image, you have permanently ruined the pixels on that image. There's no going back. So if you want to paint or fill, you want to make sure you do that on a new layer of the image. Now, your book has you do a few manipulations, and I've got about 10 or 15 minutes of image manipulations just to kind of tie up a couple of the last skills in your chapter 1 through 4. Now, when you select an image, so let's do the bird. I'm going to select the bird image. I can adjust the properties of just that layer. And there's a couple of really easy places to adjust it. I can adjust it by going to adjust, a posterize, a filter effect, a brightness contrast. So you see how the bird in brightness and contrast is the only thing being adjusted? Your book has you adjust the hue, saturation, and brightness and contrast. They fall under image adjustment. It only adjusts the layer you're on. Remember that, just like selecting pixels. It only adjusts the layer you're on. You may actually see that down here in the bottom of your layers palette, that it lets you adjust them down here as a shortcut, this little half and half symbol. Half and half symbol means that I'm adjusting the document adjustments versus adjusting the layer adjustments. So down here is property adjustments. Up here is layer adjustments. Your book has you do layer adjustments. Now, in layer adjustments, you can adjust the color of an image. So watch if I do like, let's do color balance. Hey, it might be Breast Cancer Awareness Month and I need a pink bird. I can go in and take my bird and make him pink. But I've permanently made my bird pink. So let's do this. I'm going to duplicate a layer and I'm going to move this bird over here, but I'm going to take the original bird . I have one pink bird and one natural bird, right? The beauty about Photoshop and where Photoshop masters come into play is the ability to collage images on separate layers and tell a story from those layers. And oftentimes the designer creates multiple layers of the same object, just slightly manipulated. So watch this. I'm going to put this bird on top of the other bird. So you see how there's the pink bird? Well, this is actually an animated GIF. If I exported this, I could make this blink as an image. We don't have to worry about that for this class. But what we can think about, which is very interesting, is the last tool I want to show you, which is the eraser tool. The eraser tool allows us to erase pixels. So you see this big circle? This is called a brush. So watch if I make the brush really small. What if I only wanted the bird's head to be pink? I just erased the part of the bird that I didn't want pink. And now his head is pink. Well, let me make a copy of this layer again. Image adjust. Let's do hue and saturation. So I'm going to just adjust this guy so he looks a little funky. So here he is. Maybe I only want one wing to be funky. So this bird is now made up of 3 birds. He's just missing part of his body on each layer. And each layer has just had a color adjustment made to it. Why is that important? If you ever see images of like anything that is advertising based and everything looks absolutely perfect, more times than not, the object is made up of multiple layers and each layer has a different adjustment, and they just erased the part of the image that they didn't want that adjustment to be affected at. A car that's really shiny in one spot, a model's hair that's only purple on the tips. The model never had purple tips. It was an image adjustment on that layer to adjust the color balance to purple, and they erased the hair on that layer where they didn't want it purple. You can make one model cut out of a green screen and make 10 layers of that model, and each layer of the model have a different color adjustment. And as long as you erase the area that you don't want that color adjustment, that's how you get really shiny cheekbones. That's how you get a sharp jawline. That's how you get perfect eyebrows. All it is a layer with an effect applied to it, and they erase the area they don't want that effect to apply to. It's a lot easier than airbrushing the photo with an actual airbrush to make it perfect. So just know that Photoshop is made up of layers, and it's how you manipulate the objects on that layer that makes your collage. The better you are at selecting the pixels, the better you are at copying and pasting the pixels. The better you are at copying and pasting the pixels, the better you are at applying adjustments to those pixels on that layer. But the bottom line is, remember, if I draw a box in this area of the image, there are no pixels in the shell layer on that area. So if I pick the shell layer and do copy, it's going to tell me you don't have any pixels on that layer. If I pick a bird copy 2, which is that wing, if I draw a box around his tail and do copy, I might have some pixels in that area. Right? There are no pixels in that area of the image. Everything is trickery because we're stacking all the pieces of paper on top of it. But we have to remember the original image was this beach layer minus the paint scribble that I put over the picture because I've ruined this picture now. These are all objects that were content aware fills, right? So this one is covering up that little blip in the beach. And these are layers that I copied in. So your book is teaching you how to bring those things in using the tools to make the collage and manipulate the images. But the bottom line is this is just one image with stuff on top of it. And the stuff on top of it is individual layers. And you can practice this a million times. Open up a new photo, file, open. I like the palm trees. I'm going to draw a big selection around the palm trees and do edit, copy. I'm going to copy those palm trees and do edit, paste. And looky here, here are the palm trees off the page, on the page, off the page, on the page. And they are behind all of the seashells and birds, right? They're right here. So I can copy and paste as many things as I want in here. Maybe I want just the palm tree. Let's see how good I am at it. So let's go to the magic wand and let's see if we can just get the palm trees. Palm trees are tricky because they have all these little frills on the outside, but let's just try to grab the basic silhouette. So I'm going to change my tolerance to like 10. Let's see how much I can get. Let's go to 5. Let's go to 40 so it adds more of the black. Oh, we're getting better. Let's try 60 tolerance so it adds more and more. Ooh, we're getting pretty close. Let's try 80. Click on it and I'm going to do edit, copy. I'm going to go over to my picture. I'm going to do edit, paste. Oh, they're huge. The palm trees are huge. So let's see if we can get a small copy of it. So let's go here and let's paste it. There they are. Hey, they don't look half bad. If I moved them down here and zoomed them in. Now you can see that there's space between the palm leaves. So it's not perfect. But if I was doing just a simple little, I don't know, palm tree collage of some kind to make this look like it's a little more beachier than it is, that might work. That might work. But I used the magic wand because I was in essence selecting a silhouette, a black shape in my image. And because I made my tolerance like really high, meaning it selected a lot of the shades of black, it does a pretty good job. Oh my gosh, it's like a jungle now, right? It does pretty good. So the trickery is how good can we select the pixels in order to make our collage. Now, best practice is palm, silo, sometimes I do that, or palm, picture, square. So I know what my layers are in my image. But look at this. We now have 1 layer, 2 layers, 3 layers, 4 layers, 5 layers, 6 layers, 7 layers, 8 layers, 9 layers, 10 layers. Not bad. So we covered your selection tools. We covered your eyedropper. We covered our paintbrush. We covered our clone tool. We covered our erase tool. We covered the properties menu. We covered the layers palette. And we covered the effects adjustments, image adjustments. Now, we're at the point where I wanted to be done with the lecture, so I'm going to leave you with one little nugget. If I zoom in here, and let's find my seashell. So let's go to my seashell here. The last little nugget about Photoshop is that Photoshop has properties in the layer. So you see how this is, we double clicked here and we changed the name. If we double click over here, look at this palette. This palette is all of the things that you can attach properties wise to your layer. So you see how we're on the seashell layer? I can add a drop shadow. I could add an outer glow. I could add a stroke around it. 100% opacity. I'm going to make this just a simple white stroke. I can do an inner shadow. I can do a texture over it. Most commonly, you see drop shadow. So look at this drop shadow. It's like beautiful. Let's move the angle a little bit. We'll crank down the shadow a little bit, size-wise. Look at how pretty that is. It's got like a really nice shadow around it. Your book doesn't get into layers effects or layer styles too much, but I wanted to give you a little sneak peek because you can do a whole lot with image layer adjustments, layer styles or effects, and what we call filter effects. But this is all for graphic design too. The seashell is actually blurred. Let's do. I know it makes your eyes crazy, but this is the way, I forget what the iPhone calls it now. It's where they put only the main object in focus and everything else is out of focus. Well, this is how I used to do it. I would make the palm trees out of focus. And the beach in focus. I had to do it manually. Now you can do it with the iPhone by shooting the camera a certain way. So, all right, now we've covered all of the mini steps from learning the toolbar in chapter 1 to basic color corrections, which is chapter 2, to sampling textures and kind of cleaning up images, chapter 3, to copying and pasting and naming layers in chapter 4. Covered them all in the gambit. So now for your homework, it's to do your first 4 mini projects in your Photoshop book. You can either use the student files that I posted in the announcement section, or you can download pictures from Pexels if you want to play that way in order to create your step-by-step for your chapter assignments. You can give me the PSD, you can do a save as a JPEG, you can do a save as a PDF. If you're downloading your image from home, do a JPEG. If you have a pretty good connection and you want to give me Photoshop, that's fine. I'm looking for the finished product. Let's do steps 1, 2, 3, and 4, chapters 1, 2, 3, and 4, which will give us this level of completion. And then let's shoot for maybe end of the weekend to have your 4 chapter assignments. And then next week, I would like you to create your own collage, which is your out of book project, your own collage. So you can do your step-by-step for your chapter assignments, and then I'll let you play with whatever images you want to play with to create your image collage, just like we did in our lecture here, using any pictures of your choice. So you can search the internet, you can go to Pexels.com, you can take pictures, and I'm going to have you make a simple image collage the same way we did from the step-by-step and the lecture tonight. So it's 9:20. I want to stop my recording. Thank you for joining me live online. If you want to do the lecture step-by-step again, you most certainly can watch the recording that I post later tonight or early tomorrow. If you have any questions as you navigate through the first few chapters, please remember we can do a Zoom chat. We can share ideas over email. Just reach out to me and we'll navigate through our very basic steps in Photoshop. Hopefully by next Thursday, we'll have our basic project set up and we'll move on to some really simple vector drawing next week. Everyone have a great week. Have a good long weekend. Enjoy navigating through Photoshop. And I look forward to having you same bat channel, same bat time next week as we navigate through Graphic Design 1. Everyone have a great night. I'm going to stop the recording now.